other possibilities, that the murder could be linked to Miss Dando's work on Crime Watch, that it might relate to her private life or could be the work of a stalker. The news comes as security has been stepped up at the BBC after a death threat against the corporation's head of news, also from a source claiming to be Serbian. Tony Hall and his family have now been given police protection. The BBC also announced today that after consultation with Jill Dando's family, they will not be showing the rest of her Antiques Inspectors series. Flowers are still being left at the TV presenter's home, among them today a note from an ambulanceman, apologising that his efforts hadn't been enough to save her. Helen Wright, ITN.
Scotland Yard said tonight they'd had a stream of calls from the public about the man in a baseball cap who's said to be the prime suspect in the Brixton nail bombing. He was caught on security cameras and police released the pictures earlier today. Ben McCarthy reports.
This is the video from different security cameras, which shows the man police believe was behind the Brixton nail bomb. Highlighted in these pictures, he's white, about 5'6" to 5'8" inches tall, wearing a light-coloured baseball cap and a dark zipper jacket. Police have had help from the FBI in America to enhance the pictures, which they think show the man checking out the area before planting the bomb. Detectives are sure someone knows who he is.
It is most urgent that they identify him. We believe that this man was responsible for the device at Brixton, and somebody out there knows him.
Almost 40 people were injured in the Brixton nail bomb. It exploded without warning on a busy Saturday afternoon 12 days ago. That was followed by another blast on Brick Lane in the East End of London last Saturday. Police have linked the two bombs and say they were racist attacks. The Metropolitan Police have now published the face of the man they want to interview on their most wanted list. They're describing today's video pictures as an important development in their investigation into who was behind the bombing. Tonight, detectives say they've had a steady stream of calls in response to the new video pictures, but they're still urging anyone who has information about their prime suspect to contact the anti-terrorist hotline. Ben McCarthy, ITN, at Scotland Yard.
A new attempt was underway tonight to negotiate a way out of the Kosovo war. As more NATO bombs fell on Serbia, putting state TV off the air again, President Yeltsin's envoy Viktor Chernomyrdin was claiming that the positions of Russia and the West had moved closer. Robert Moore reports.
Late this evening, as Russia's Balkan envoy Viktor Chernomyrdin arrived in Rome on his way to Yugoslavia, the pace of Moscow's diplomacy has been stepped up. But it remains extremely doubtful that much will come of his mission. There are no signs that Belgrade will accept a NATO-led force in Kosovo, the minimum demand of the Western powers. And in the Kremlin, Boris Yeltsin met the UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan, warning that the stakes were now high, not just for the Balkans and Europe, but for the whole world. Certainly there will be no pause in the bombing amid the renewed diplomacy. NATO even intensified its strikes on Yugoslavia's smaller pro-Western Republic of Montenegro. The Defence Secretary, George Robertson, who was today visiting HMS Invincible in the Adriatic, has announced that more warplanes, Harriers and Tornadoes will shortly be deployed as reinforcements. And he insisted once again that air power was doing severe damage to what he called the Serb war machine.
We are weakening that machine very substantially. Day by day we are disrupting the violence, and eventually we will get people home. There's no time limit for us, but time is running out for Milosevic.
Many of the targets being hit are part of Yugoslavia's infrastructure. Bridges over the Danube and now over the River Sava are being systematically destroyed. But NATO did suffer a major embarrassment. One of its missiles headed spectacularly off target and hit a house in Bulgaria. No one was killed, but Bulgaria is demanding an explanation. Senior British officials remain pessimistic about that Russian diplomacy. They point out that Belgrade has shown no movement towards core Western demands, not least in allowing a NATO-led force into Kosovo to take charge of the province. Robert Moore, ITN, at the Foreign Office.
More British troops arrived in the Balkans today, officially to help implement a Kosovo peace deal in due course. But as Colin Baker reports from northern Greece, their hardware equally suggests they could form part of a NATO invasion force.
It's the best their hosts can provide. A leaking, dark and disused warehouse on a dockside. This is the British forces' induction to the Balkans. Their first order is unambiguous and strictly enforced. No one's to leave the building. Greece is a NATO member, but here in Thessalonica, its allies' colours have to be hidden from public view. For these soldiers, though, their attention is concentrated further north. Off the coast, anchored anonymously, a Royal Fleet auxiliary ship laden with battle hardware waits for Greek permission to dock. If there is an agreement to send in a peace implementation force, these will be the tools for the job. Bridge layers will be essential. NATO intelligence says the Serb army has mined and set explosives on all bridges in Kosovo for demolition. On the cargo deck, hidden by diesel fumes, some of NATO's key ground force weapons, self-propelled guns and Challenger battle tanks, more than capable of taking on Serb armour, but NATO, suitably defensive, calls them peace enforcers.
British battle tanks arriving in the Balkans, yet NATO still insists they're only here to take part in an eventual peacekeeping operation inside Kosovo. Yet their arrival tonight is a political statement of intent, because if there's no compliance from Belgrade, then this squadron of tanks will inevitably become part of the ground force operation of this war.
But for the moment, for all of these soldiers, this is a venture into the unknown. They've been deployed on an operation for which the final orders have yet to be written. Colin Baker, ITN, Thessalonica.
More Kosovan refugees arrived in Britain tonight from camps in Macedonia. The 169 who flew into East Midlands Airport are the second group to be brought to Britain. They included 2 babies and a pregnant woman, and despite being exhausted, they were clearly pleased to be here. Some are spending their first night in this country at a hotel in Leicester, the others at a mansion in Derbyshire. 2 doctors today described how they saved a young stabbing victim's life by performing open heart surgery on the floor of a crowded pub. One of the doctors then held his finger in the wound until the operation was completed in hospital. Lawrence McGuinty has the full extraordinary story.
These are the 2 helicopter medics who saved the life of a man stabbed in the chest in a pub. They used a clamp to force apart his ribs so they could operate on his heart. A technique one of them, Heather Clark, learnt only 2 days before and had never performed in an operating theatre, let alone a pub.
You make an incision all the way across the front of the chest and cut between the ribs and through the breastbone, and the whole chest just opens up like a clamshell, so it's a fairly straightforward procedure.
Miracles, they say, can happen in the strangest of places, and the Swan pub on a busy high street in London's East End is as unusual as you can get. For miracle it was. 22-year-old Stephen Nyland had been stabbed through the heart. As he lay on the pub floor, blood from his heart was forming a clot around it and stopped it beating.
Get a clot forming the sac around the heart, so I made a hole in that, released the clot, and the heart actually started on its own after that. I didn't need to do anything else. And Alistair put a finger in the wound and just stopped the blood from coming out.
I kept my finger there, into the ambulance, into hospital, up into theatre, and in the fact the cardiac surgeon was operating around my finger.
Just doing their job, giving life back to a young man. 2 minutes later, and he would be dead. Lawrence McGuinty, ITN, at the London Hospital.
Editors were today given new Press Complaints Commission guidelines for stories about Prince William and Prince Harry. In return for restrained coverage of public events, more official information will be given out about their progress at school. The disclosure that the new Welsh Assembly will have the power to lift the beef on the bone ban, whatever happens in England, sparked new interest in the election campaign today. Party leaders from across the border were already beginning to get involved. ITN's Tim Rogers reports.
First of the big guns from Westminster out on the campaign trail, Paddy Ashdown visited a dental school in Cardiff to promote the Liberal Democrats' call for reduced hospital waiting lists. And on a day when the Constitution has been an issue, he said he'd like to see an assembly with greater powers in future. The question was raised following confirmation from the government that the beef on the bone ban could be lifted by a Welsh Assembly independently of Westminster. Plaid Cymru, the Welsh nationalists, say the ban should be lifted as soon as the Assembly convenes. Tory party chairman Michael Ancram, also visiting Cardiff, agrees. Although Labour Party leader Alan Michael is non-committal about lifting the ban. He says it'll depend on scientific evidence. Speaking to the Wales TUC, he attacked the Tories, claiming their management of Wales in the past had wrecked the economy. Calls for a beef on the bone ban to be lifted are likely to be one of the first demands facing a Welsh Assembly, a real test of its future relationship with Westminster. Tim Rogers, ITN, Cardiff.
The Labour MP Fiona Jones, who was barred from Parliament over her general election expenses, returned to the House of Commons today to Labour cheers. Mrs Jones had her conviction for electoral fraud overturned on appeal. She was allowed to retake her seat as MP for Newark after getting permission today, first from the High Court and then from the Speaker, Betty Boothroyd. Weathermen and women have today started building new health warnings into their forecasts. They're now including figures for expected levels of ultraviolet radiation, which carries the risk of sunburn and skin cancer. Chris Choi reports.
Some of the best-known forecasters in the UK launched the new sun warnings today.
Sun-damaged skin, even tan skin, let alone sunburned skin, is damaged skin, and that long-term can lead to skin cancer.
The information is shown as a scale from 1 to 20, indicating danger from the sun. A summer day in the UK will be between 5 and 8. Those with a fair skin are at risk when UV levels reach 5. Skins that tan easily could be in danger when UV levels reach 7. And darker skin could be affected when levels hit 10 or 11. Patricia Fitzgerald studies weather forecasts more than most. She had a skin growth like the one in this health leaflet.
America and Australia's had this system for quite a few years, but it's a start really, and I'm very pleased personally about it because of what's happened. Not that I'll be doing any more sunbathing anyway.
The warning started today and cancer charities hope for a quick impact. Health officials know they have a tough job coping with the traditional response to the arrival of sun in the UK. They say attitudes, not just weather bulletins, need to change. Chris Choi, ITN, Central London.
A report out tonight says